Call the member for Fisher.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm a proud graduate of Holmes Glen College of TAFE, where I attended and completed my qualifications for my carpentry and joinery apprenticeship in the mid to late 1980s. Mr Deputy Speaker, I've listened to the speeches of those opposite in the debate on the second reading of this bill and am dumbfounded at the hypocrisy of those opposite. Mr Deputy Speaker, Australia's vocational education and training, its VET sector, is one of the central pillars of our economy and our future. At a time when Australia is competing with the formidable economic power of many North Asian countries that have highly skilled labour, we must ensure our vocational education sector is strong and secure. Our nation's economy and our future depends upon it. Last week, the Minister for Education and Training announced sweeping reforms to Australia's VET system. The purpose of the VET Student Loans Bill 2016 is to replace Labor's failed VET fee help loan scheme from the 1st of January 2017 and introduce a vastly improved student loan program for vocational education and training. These reforms are essential to safeguard the long-term relevance and integrity of vocational education in this country. They will protect the honest players in the industry and give value for money to both students and, importantly, to taxpayers. At the outset, Mr Deputy Speaker, I want to make it clear that I firmly believe that not all VET private suppliers are shonky, but many of them have proven to act inappropriately, and that's something that this government has called out. The need for reform is obvious. In its current form, the VET fee help scheme, Labor's VET fee help scheme, has a list of more than 800 courses, including many that have been superseded or are lifestyle-focused with little relevance to Australia's workforce requirements. Since Labor expanded the scheme in 2012, all diploma-level courses were automatically eligible for funding under the Labor scheme, leading to unsustainable growth and widespread rorting in the sector. What's more, far too many courses that won't ever lead to meaningful or paid work are being subsidised by the taxpayer. It has left many students with large debts and, in some cases, little to no training outcome or work prospects. Mr Deputy Speaker, the key statistics tell a sorry tale of waste and rorting that must raise the eyebrows of even the most die-hard Labor supporter. From a cost of $325 million in 2012, Labor's VET fee help scheme exploded to a cost of a staggering $1.8 billion in 2014 and a whopping $2.9 billion in 2015. Student numbers jumped by 5,000% from 2009. Course fees tripled and loans increased by 11,000% from 2009. Modelling by the Grattan Institute estimates 40% of Labor's VET fee help student loans will never be repaid because the student's income will never rise above the repayment threshold of $53,000. What does that mean? That means that the taxpayer is going to pick up the cost. Mr Deputy Speaker, according to a University of Sydney study, under Labor's deregulated system, where private training colleges are free to set their own fees, some of Australia's largest registered training organisations are raking in profit margins of more than 50%, enabled by loans funded by the Australian taxpayer. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Coalition takes very seriously its responsibility to ensure taxpayers' dollars are spent wisely, and that includes funding education and training programs that have the maximum chance to leading to jobs. To this end, the government has taken a responsible and measured approach to reform the vet sector by running a test over all of the different diploma levels and above qualifications available to ensure they are on at least 2 state and territory skills needs test lists. The government has also looked at other areas of high economic need, such as science, technology, engineering and mathematics, the so-called STEMs subjects, for skills or agricultural skills, to make sure the list meets our national economic priorities. As a result, the government has announced 347 courses that are expected to attract funding support under the new government's affordable, sustainable, student-focused vet student loans program. The government's new student loans program will protect prospective students by banning brokers or agents from engaging or recruiting students in relation to loans, prohibiting contact with students regarding the availability of loans unless the student has expressly consented to contact by the particular provider, and broadening the circumstances for which student loans may be recredited. The government's new loans program will mirror and retain many of the important student protection reforms to Labor's vet fee help scheme introduced through the government's Higher Education Support Vet Fee Help Reform Amendment Act of 2015. This includes measures such as the ban on prohibited inducements and cold calling, the requirement to have a parent or guardian signature for students under the age of 18, and relevant enforcement provisions. The new government's program, will raise the bar for entry by providers to the program to ensure providers have robust governance and management arrangements and maintain acceptable student outcomes and, importantly, with industry links. The program will introduce an application fee for bodies to apply to become approved course providers and imposing an annual levy on providers. It will link loans to courses that meet industry needs. Fancy that, a course that will meet industry needs. And it will also address skill shortages and improving the quality of the course delivery by only enabling providers to subcontract training to other approved course providers or higher education providers. It will toughen entry requirements for providers, properly considered loan caps on courses, stronger course eligibility criteria aligned to industry needs, mandatory student engagement measures and a stronger focus on students successfully completing courses. It will strengthen compliance, governance and payment arrangements, including by triggering relevant regulatory powers from the Regulatory Powers Standard Provisions Act of 2014. It will limit eligible courses to those that align with industry needs and are based on analysis of employer and government data to ensure they lead to good employment opportunities. It will include 3 bands of loan caps set at $5,000, $10,000 and $15,000 for courses, depending on their delivery cost, putting downward pressure on fees and addressing cost blowouts. It will require students to log in and engage with the Vet Student Loans online portal to ensure they are active and legitimate enrolments. The new program will feature a new application process with a much higher bar to entry for providers wanting to access vet student loans, including examining student completion rates, the employment outcomes of courses offered and their track record as education institutions. Mr Deputy Speaker, as part of these important reforms, the government will also strengthen legislative compliance and payment conditions, including the ability to cap provider loan amounts and student numbers and to limit course scope. The government will also assume powers to suspend poor-performing providers from the program, cancel their payments and revoke their approval. Mr Deputy Speaker, while TAFEs and public providers will automatically transition to the new program, private providers will be required to meet a range of quality measures to be granted an initial 6-month trial period under the new program. Private providers will then need to apply later in 2016 to access the new program from 1 July 2017. Providers that are not successful will not be able to access the new program. There will also be a stronger focus on compliance, with the Education Department working with VET regulator, the Australian Skills Quality Authority, ASQA, and the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission to closely scrutinise providers. Mr Deputy Speaker, these measures will reduce the value of new student loans being issued by more than $2.4 billion per year by the end of the forward estimates in 2019-20. This will in turn lead to an estimated reduction in otherwise total outstanding help debt of more than $7 billion by June 2020 and by more than $25 billion by June 2026. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Turnbull government wants to get the balance right and is consulting with stakeholders to finalise the list of courses to be funded from next year. If a case can be made that a course has very strong employment outcomes, then it will be reinstated. Alternatively, if a course that is included on the revised list should not be, well, then we'll reconsider that also. Mr Deputy Speaker, VET student loans hit the reset button on Labor's flawed VET fee help scheme so that Australians can start to rebuild their trust in vocational education and taxpayers can ensure their money isn't wasted. VET student loans will only support legitimate students to undertake worthwhile and value-for-money courses at quality training providers. Mr Deputy Speaker, I call on my parliamentary colleagues to work with the government to help us ensure the new VET student loans program is legislated in time for commencement on 1 January 2017.